Welcome back to Counterspin. We're talking about the regional implications of war in Iraq. And we shift to Iran at this point because Iran's been called axis of evil by the United States, but now there are signs that Iran is cooperating with the United States. Maybe you could explain that schizophrenia to us, Handi.
It's complete schizophrenia. On the one hand, you have Rafsanjani and Khatami, $15 million was the Iranian parliament dedicating to the anti-war, anti-American campaign. On the other hand, we know that the foreign minister of Iran is met with Tony Blair, and they're meeting with the Americans, trying to take guarantees from the Americans that Iran is not next on the list. I don't know. I think, again, the Americans are promising the moon, and everybody's trying to get their share of the pie.
What does Iran get for this?
Well, it doesn't get much. I think what it ends up happening is I think it loses in the long term. And the issue that I see that is germane for the question of Iran and how this coming war is going to affect Iran in particular is that it will set back significantly the steady, gradual democratization process that is taking place there.
What does happen to the reform movement then?
It essentially gives a strong card to the conservative clerics who are saying that, look, we don't need democracy, we don't need human rights, we don't need a free press. Our major concern is an impending attack from the great superpower. And what they point to is they point to Afghanistan next door, American troops on the ground. They point to the Gulf. Last time I checked, close to 200,000 American troops. They point to Iran's western flank, regime change, a pro-American government. They point to the north, pro-American governments in Central Asia. It's hard to argue against that.
But what happens to the principle of anti-Americanism, the principle of we're going to resist this war? That's all we've heard from all these governments since in the past 3 or 4 months. And now suddenly we're all seeing them coming on side. Mustafa?
Well, I don't think Iran is going to escape from the pressures, because all signs indicate that U.S. will establish there not only for 18 months as it claims right now. It'll exist. It'll survive in that region. It plans to settle in that region for a long term. At least, I mean, the agreements between Turkey and the United States is at least for 5, sometimes 10-year agreements, and so these bases will be operating for the next 10 years. And if in the case of Iran, if you will listen to, for example, Richard Tennett's, he's the CIA director, statement yesterday, he's basically suggesting that Iran is one of those rogue nations supporting Al-Qaeda, supporting terrorist efforts. So these are early signs that, you know, Iran might be on the target as well. So
well, let's just quickly let's try and organize this, how it might look in a post-war situation. We're going to have an interim government in Iraq run by the United States, correct? Mm-hmm. And then what happens to the rest? Maybe just give me a sense of what the rest of this map looks like.
Well, one of the things that, if you look at Iraq internally, is there will not be a Shiite majority, even though Shiites compose of majority in the country. It's just because of the way the geopolitics will change by having a Shiite majority in Iraq. Iran is a Shiite country, and Iran has been enough trouble for the Americans in that region. And so what they try to do is, by having a provisional government, it will not going to be a sort of completely appointed officials. There will be some elected and appointed. In this case, the Kurds and Sunnis in the north will have a greater share in politics and power. And whether that's going to be democratic enough or not, but that's another question. But we'll come back to the questions of Iran and looking at the map in general, is that Iran, again, is going to become completely isolated in that region and being surrounded by Americans from on all its borders. So, and in this case, Iran has learned its lesson from Afghanistan. They stayed neutral and they lost. I mean, they lost influence in the coming governments in Afghanistan, and all their parties are supported. Pretty much, they're out of office, or at least out of any controls. And what they try to do is, at least if they can be part of the war, they try to influence the coming government, which the Shiite will compose, partly in the coming government administration.
Yeah, and then we have the bizarre announcement by King Abdullah of Jordan, saying that if the Americans ask him to have a confederacy over Iraq, then he would favorably look at that proposition. I mean, like, these are really bizarre And you can say that King Abdullah is not just sat in his room and thought about it alone. I mean, there are proposals for a confederacy, and that's because Saudi Arabia,
so who's going to be in charge? Who'll be the principal power in the Middle East when this is done?
I think King Amir Hassan, the former heir. Replacing King. I think seriously, like you said in the break, we were talking that democracy cannot be imposed on the Middle East via agreements that take place secretively in Europe and in the US. We saw that the tragedies that we are living are the tragedies of the San Remo and Sykes-Picot agreement, when the colonial powers sat and basically divided the Ottoman inheritance. And I think that we're seeing the same thing now. And this is why what we're saying is that this war is not just about oil. This war about extending US, like you said, Nader, extending US hegemony, but extending US hegemony in a way that the Middle East that we know and we grow up with is not going to be the Middle East that we're going to be seeing very soon.
Okay, we have to take a short break. We'll be back after this. Please don't go away. Welcome back to Counterspin. We're talking about the regional implications of war in Iraq, and I'm on my feet, which means we're with the audience now. I want to ask audience members if they have a sense of, will U.S. intervention help or hinder democratic movements in that region?
Hi. I personally think I want to clarify one thing, that the political landscape has changed after the Gulf War. At that time, it was still the Cold War, and the Cold War hadn't ended. And now we live in a post-Cold War era where democratization in the Middle East has become an objective. And in that sense, I think that America has helped the Kurds, especially in the region, in northern Iraq, to establish a regional government. And that experiment with democracy, I think, will go a long way towards establishing a framework for democracy once a U.S. intervention takes place.
And you think the United States will help create those democracies or democratic movements?
I think definitely that the Kurds definitely cannot do it without American support. They're going to need the framework for establishing some sort of democracy. I also want to make the point that Turkey might cause a problem in establishing democracy in the region, because it opposes, of course, the changing of the borders. But I think that
let's put that to Mustafa. You want to respond to that? Where are you? There you are.
Yes.
Do you want to respond to what she's saying about Turkey becoming a problem then?
No, but Turkey has clear objectives, and they want to defend the international agreements, at least signed in by Lausanne Treaty. But the trouble here right now is that there are too many promises to very different parts, and it is very difficult. And we are already dealing with the previous grand design coming from the West after the First World War to carve the map of the Middle East to create a stable regime in the Middle East, according to, of course, their interests. They are coming with another alternative design now. God help us how we are going to deal with the next one.
Okay, I'm going to ask this gentleman, will the United States intervention help or hinder democracy, democratic movements?
I don't know. I mean, the question is quite laughable. I think if
okay.
I mean, there is a legacy for the United States in the region to hinder democracy, and it's not only this time. It has been historically. The United States have played a pivotal role in terms of suppressing any form of alternative to the existing governments that are friendly and maintaining the interest of the United States in the region. Certainly, if the United States wanted and continue to spread democracy in the Middle East, they could have done it long time ago, and they could have done it many ways. They could have done it certainly not by war. They could have done it through resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict. They could have done it through peaceful means. Not arming governments, including Saddam Hussein. Let's not forget, the United States is single-handedly responsible for the rise of Saddam Hussein.
I want to hear Sharif respond to that.
Well, there are too many things in the Middle East that you can't do all at once. I mean, if you look at the balance of power in the Middle East after the Iranian Revolution that happens, a lot of things changed. And what happened is, prior to the revolution, we had a regime in power that to some extent was going towards that, even though it was with the monarchy. But you could have seen up to now, if that monarchy was in effect, things have changed a lot. But what happened is, after the revolution, the balance of power in the region changed, and definitely the United States, to counter the Iranian influence and with the Iranian quote-unquote export of Islamic revolutions, they had to counter somehow. In this case, you will support governments in the region that are not democratic. In this case, they supported Iraqi Saddam Hussein. That was completely was just for them to make the balance in the power and the region, that they had to do that. In this case,
just a point of information. 2 years ago, the U.S. Undersecretary of State Edward Walker described Tunisia, a North African Muslim country, as a stable, democratic country whose president won by 99.52% of the vote the last time
and we know how.
I counted. And so there's serious questions whether the United States can even understand or identify democracy in the Middle East, let alone support it.
Okay, I want to ask this gentleman, do you think the United States will help or hinder democratic movements?